The readings that we hear today are readings that are commonly used in the funeral liturgy. In fact, some of these are among the most popular readings used in the funeral liturgy. And it's appropriate as we gather here, not only celebrating All Souls, but especially remembering those who have passed on from our community in this past year. This first reading, I think, is very popular because it is comforting for people to hear those words. The souls of the just are in the hands of God, and no torment shall touch them. And as long as I've been doing this, one thing I've never had anyone ask me, well, what about the souls of the unjust? What does it say about them? Well, we pray for them too. We pray for the saints that we know are in heaven, and we pray for those who are trying to reach heaven but have not done so yet, that are having more difficulty. And why does the church teach that? Because those who maintain some bondage to sin but have not abandoned Christ, then Christ will not abandon them. Our earliest tradition and teaching about this comes from the Old Testament, from the book of Maccabees. It's another story about a very difficult time in Jerusalem when Jerusalem had been captured and the temple defiled, and there were a group of people hiding in the hills as freedom fighters trying to liberate their land and drive the invaders away. And they had just fought and won a difficult battle, and many of their comrades had died, so they immediately set about to bury them after the battle. And when they went to do that, they discovered that the men who had died in battle had pagan amulets under their tunics. And they said, well, that must be why they fell in battle. So what did they do? They didn't abandon these men. They still buried them, and then they took up a collection for an offertory in the temple so that they could continue to pray for the souls of these men. Because in their hearts, they weren't bad men. They were fighting to liberate the Holy Land. They gave their lives trying to liberate God's throne on earth, to defend that. But yes, they had done some bad things. But the people did not abandon them, and they continued to pray for them because they didn't believe that God would abandon them either, since they had not abandoned him. The second reading that we hear today, St. Paul is reminding us that Christ came into this world to set us free, that he came into this world to set free all those with bondage to sin. He said he did not give his life for righteous people. He didn't come into our world to die for the righteous, but for sinners, so that all people could receive God's mercy, so that all people could be set free. And that's what we hear Jesus saying again in the gospel reading, that he came into this world not to do his will, but to do his Father's will. And it is his Father's will that he should not lose any that his Father gave to him, that all people will be drawn and called to him, and he will raise them up on the last day and not lose any. Some people have asked why the church doesn't talk more about people who are not in heaven. And another teaching of the church is the church will never make an affirmation that anyone is in hell, that we know any individual person is in hell, although it's almost certain that there are people there. And the reason the church doesn't do this is because we believe that there is no limit to the mercy of God. And there's no way that we can affirm that a person is in hell without placing a limit on the mercy of God. There's been some controversy about that in the last few years, and people arguing against those who teach that we pray for all people and we pray for the hope that hell is empty, when we listen to Jesus' teaching knowing that it's almost certainly not. But can we have the hope that hell is empty? I think we can not only have that hope, but we have to. Because if we don't at least live with the hope, then we are placing a limit on the mercy of God, which is something that we cannot do. Because we know that God calls all of us to be saints. He has called all of us to be members of the communion of saints. And that brings me full circle to where I was yesterday, that we all have this calling, we all have this path to holiness. And many of us will struggle with this. Many of us may get discouraged and think, how can I do this? I am an imperfect person. I certainly have my flaws. It's hard for me to see myself comparing to the saints. How can I become a saint with the life I lead? And we find hope in knowing that we are not going to do anything to make ourselves worthy of being saints. Christ has already done that for us. Our calling is to seek Christ and trust in the mercy of God. That's where we will always have our hope, and that's the path that will lead us to Him.